Today's case begins with a mother's worst nightmare, something incredibly simple, an unanswered text message. Heidi Noel had a daily routine with her 22-year-old daughter, Liese Dodd. She'd check in every single day just to hear from her. But on this day, the reply never came. And as the hours ticked by, that silence grew heavier and heavier, changing from simple concern to absolute dread. Liese was 8 months pregnant, just weeks away from welcoming her own baby girl into the world. And for her to just go silent, it was wrong. What Heidi would discover later that day was a scene of such horror that even a veteran police chief would later struggle for words, saying only that she found her daughter in a way that you just cannot imagine. This story starts with the promise of new life and ends in an act of unimaginable darkness. Hi everyone, welcome back. And to anyone new watching, hello, my name is Zara. And on this channel, we dive into true crime cases. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please join the fam and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like and share it around if you can. Taking 2 seconds to really do that really helps out the channel and it means so much to me. So to everyone that always does it, thank you so much. Also, if you want to get to know each other a little bit more, consider becoming a member. You get instant access to our private Discord server and we can chat one-on-one about anything and everything. You can just hit the join button below this video to get in. Okay, now let's jump into this deeply disturbing case. Liese Dodd was a source of pure light. Her family said she was this force of joy and kindness, and her mother Heidi described her as a bright, loving soul. Her older sister Shelby called Liese an amazing person with a bubbly personality and a heart of gold. She was a happy-go-lucky kind of girl whose smile could just light up any room. Liese was born on August 14th, 1999 in Alton, Illinois, to her mom Heidi and her dad James Jimmy Dodd. So she grew up in the nearby town of Jerseyville and graduated from Jersey Community High School in 2017. And her sister Shelby said that her little sister's defining characteristic was her boundless capacity for love. She had this huge heart, whether it was for people or animals. She just wanted to spread love everywhere. That love of animals was a core part of who she was. So for her 10th birthday, instead of asking for toys or gifts for herself, Liese organized a fundraiser for the Riverbend Humane Society, turning her celebration into helping animals who couldn't help themselves. It was an early sign of the compassionate woman she was becoming. She was a hardworking and familiar face in her hometown, serving customers at the local Dairy Queen and later at Nick's Pancake House. Beyond her work, she had dreams and goals of entering the medical field, following her mom's footsteps, and another path that would have allowed her to fulfill her desire to care for others. But in the spring of 2022, her greatest love was growing inside her. In March, she had moved into her own apartment in Alton, and this was to start a new chapter in her life. She was nearly 8 months pregnant at this point. She was expecting her first child, a baby girl, with a due date of 27th July 2022. She referred to the baby as Baby Bean, a sweet, intimate nickname that really showed the deep bond she already felt with her daughter. The future she was building was a dream come true for her. Her family was in the final stages of planning her baby shower, which was set for June 26, 2022. And her sister Shelby was extremely excited. It was going to be her sister's first baby. Liese had a couple of names picked out and she already had so many clothes ready and just so much stuff for the baby. So her online baby registry, I believe, was just asking for a simple pink princess crib sheet. She didn't really need much. Liese was so ready and just couldn't wait for her daughter to be born. So the man in her life, at least on and off, was 22-year-old DeAndre Holloway. For about 2 years, they had been in what was consistently described by both law enforcement and her family as a tumultuous and on-again, off-again relationship. Now, when people use the term on and off again, I feel like it just tells you what type of relationship it was, that it's a constant cycle of instability, conflict, and emotional turbulence, a pattern that is tragically common in cases associated with domestic violence. And this relationship had exactly that. Many people, including Lisa's former boss, witnessed DeAndre being violent towards her. She saw him punch her while they were in the car together, and Lisa would return back to work with 2 black eyes. She knew Lisa had to be taken to the emergency room while on break at work after, again, being punched in the face by DeAndre. I believe he broke her nose that time, and she had bruises on her arms constantly from being grabbed by him.
What specifically did you see when the day you actually witnessed her being battered? What did you see?
A punch in the face.
You saw Mr. Holloway punch her
face.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were they in the car when that happened, or were they outside the car?
No, they were in the car, and we have cameras on the back of the building. We actually tried to roll the cameras back, but they're not very good definition, so we weren't able to actually see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, people around her knew what was going on, and eventually Lisa did admit to her boss that DeAndre was abusive, but she didn't want to report him to the police. In September of 2021, Lisa texted her boss saying that she needed her shift covered because she was abused by her boyfriend and she was staying with her mom to be safe. Her boss thought that she was finally separating from him and that she would finally leave him for good, but before she knew it, they were back together. His own family acknowledged that he had mental health issues and violent tendencies. DeAndre would punch himself in the face a lot. When he would get frustrated, he would yell at himself. And DeAndre's own mother took out a protection order against her son because she was frightened by his behavior. And despite Lisa and DeAndre being together for 2 years, it was only in May, June of 2022 that Lisa was introduced to DeAndre's sister, PJ. So I feel like their relationship more so was between the two of them. You know what I mean? It wasn't that type of relationship that like their families were involved in because they were so tumultuous and chaotic. PJ, DeAndre's sister, claimed that her brother's relationship with Lisa was very toxic. She claimed they would abuse substances often. He would often stay with multiple people, including Lisa, his uncle, friends, and other family members, and he didn't have like a stable place of his own. He would take off whenever he and Lisa got into an argument and go stay with someone else for the night. During this meeting with PJ, I believe their first meeting, DeAndre told her that he was the father of Lisa's baby. Now that would make sense, right? Because they were in this on-again, off-again relationship. When they moved into the Alton apartment together, so I believe it was Lisa's apartment, but he would stay with her, they had regular fights that neighbors claimed would shake the entire building. They would hear them being pushed up against walls, things being thrown at each other, and neighbors even witnessed their volatile screaming matches. In fact, they were so used to it that they didn't even bother calling the police anymore. They would instead, text the landlord and say, oh, here they go again. And they would even leave their own apartments and go and sit on the porch or something just to wait out their fight so they didn't have to be in their own apartment hearing this screaming and chaos. DeAndre would text a friend around this time saying he didn't know how to handle his emotions. He felt overwhelmed with life, reflecting that he felt that he had a lot thrown at him. He had to grow up very fast and he could not deal with issues that were currently happening or without crying or snapping. Like he couldn't deal with the emotions. Lisa's mom, Heidi, as you can imagine, being that close with her daughter, was very concerned about their relationship. Lisa would often confide in Heidi during their fights. And I have to say that Heidi, like looking at the text messages, Heidi was very non-judgmental, very open and easy to talk to. So Lisa would tell her everything. Heidi knew that their fights got violent. She knew that her daughter felt like ending her life at times. And she stayed very supportive and comforting during these moments. But deep down, she was hoping that Lisa could be set free from DeAndre. In June 2022, when she was 8 months pregnant, Lisa was moving forward, laser focused on building a new life for her and her baby girl. DeAndre, it seems, was a part of her past and her present that she couldn't fully shake. But there was a critical piece of information that would reframe the entire story and point towards a potential motive. In an interview later on, Lisa's mother, Heidi, made a crucial clarification. DeAndre Holloway was not the father of Lisa's baby. This fact changes everything. Lisa was not just pregnant. She was pregnant with another man's child. She was preparing for a future that possibly did not include DeAndre. On June 9th, 2022, Heidi went about her day, but she had this growing sense of unease. Her daily check-in text to Lisa had gone unanswered. The last she heard from her daughter was the night before at 9 p.m. while she was out driving with DeAndre. As the hours passed with no response, that unease turned into real fear. Lisa was so close to her due date, and it was completely out of character for her to be out of touch for so long. Driven by that primal sense that connects a mother to her own child, Heidi went to Lisa's new apartment on Bolivar Street in Alton just before 1 p.m. The apartment was supposed to be a sanctuary, a fresh start for this young mom-to-be. So CCTV captures Heidi entering the code to the apartment complex and going inside. Lisa lived in apartment 4. But what Heidi found when she opened that door was a scene of pure, unimaginable horror. She ran out of the apartment 2 minutes later, struggling to breathe. The neighbor, April, arrived home around the same time and was confronted by Heidi's panicked state and her grabbing her phone to call 911.
911 was the address of
Yeah. Hi. Listen.
What's going on
My
there?
girlfriend's daughter is killed. Yeah.
What's going on there?
My girlfriend, I'm sorry, my daughter's, she chopped her head off.
What was the last time? What time did you last hear from her?
It was like 9:05 or so. I had sent her a text, and she said they were talking. And then I tried again at 10, and she didn't answer. And then I tried this morning 2 times, and she didn't answer. And so then I came over here because she usually answers.
Okay. So last time we talked to her was last night when she sent you a text message, right?
Yes.
Okay. The officers are coming. They'll be there.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Okay.
After the most vile discovery rippled out to the neighbors, April, who lived next door, recalled the sudden flood of police cars and the sense of tragedy that came over their quiet street. April said her mom looked so broken. She turned around, she looked at us, and she said, "He killed her." That single statement, "he killed her," was the beginning of a police investigation into a crime so brutal it would shock the entire community. Inside that apartment, they found 22-year-old Lisa, who was 8 months pregnant, dead. With the discovery of Lisa's body, the Alton Police Department launched a full-scale homicide investigation. Heidi had one suspect, DeAndre. She knew he hurt her daughter. On June 9th, the police got a search warrant for DeAndre's mother's home. In the bin outside, they find clothes he wore the night before and a pile of his dreadlocks, which he cut off and wrapped in toilet paper. The manhunt for DeAndre didn't last long, and in a really strange turn of events, he was actually arrested by police in another town, Gillespie, Illinois, on June 9th. This was in connection with a completely unrelated case. He was actually caught trying to steal a bicycle, and then once he was caught, he was found to have on him. So once he was in custody, the Gillespie police called the Alton police on June 10th, and he was quickly linked to a far more serious crime that had taken place in Alton. While in custody, he was not cooperative, and it's quite distressing, the footage of him being held, because he basically loses it, and it's pretty violent.
Don't do that. They just fucking did that. You come in here. Don't do that. Do something. That's what I'm saying. Do something. Do something. Don't do that. Don't do that.
DeAndre's fingerprints and DNA is taken, and he is interviewed by police on June 10th. DeAndre refuses to talk. On June 13th, 2022, just 4 days after Lisa's body was found, the Madison County State's Attorney's Office hit DeAndre with a bunch of charges that reflected the dual nature of his crime. 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for Lisa, one for her unborn baby, and 2 counts of intentional homicide of an unborn child, dismembering a human body and concealing a homicidal death together with possession of a stolen vehicle. His bond was set at a staggering $2 million, and he was taken into custody. So with the suspect in custody, the public was about to learn the full horrifying truth of what happened inside that apartment. As investigators processed the crime scene, the true horror of what DeAndre had done was revealed. So just a trigger warning here that we are going to be discussing a pretty violent crime and domestic violence. So if that triggers you, maybe skip this part. So Lisa had an argument with DeAndre on June 7th, and DeAndre left her apartment that evening. When she returned home from her shift, Lisa hadn't seen or heard from DeAndre, which was pretty unusual for him. So she confided in her mom, saying she was really upset and she didn't know what to do, and she was extremely worried about him. She even had thoughts of ending her life, even cutting her leg with a razor. Her mom said maybe this was a blessing in disguise that he left, she was now set free, and she was glad it didn't turn violent this time. Lisa stated, however, that she couldn't see it in that way yet. She felt like she just couldn't get anything right in her life. So she went for a drive at 1:30 a.m. that night to calm herself down. The next day, June 8th, Liese still didn't hear from him, so she contacted his sister PJ, asking if she knew where he was. Heidi then told her to check with the landlord if he saw anything on the CCTV cameras, so Liese then contacted the landlord and asked him to review security footage to see if they could find out what time DeAndre had left the apartment. So it was discovered that DeAndre was with his uncle Morty at 6:30 p.m. on June 7th. So Liese then gets a text from Uncle Morty at 8 p.m. who says he will drop DeAndre back home soon. Heidi told Liese that she better be careful that he doesn't pass something on to her that could hurt the baby. Later that evening, Liese was working her shift at Nick's Pancake House when DeAndre was dropped off by his uncle Morty. So when he arrived at her work, he waited for her shift to end and then she drove home with him. During this car ride, she's texting her mom Heidi about how she's in the car with him and how she's trying to figure their situation out. The last text Liese sent was at 9:08 p.m. So footage shows Liese and DeAndre pulling up to the apartment at about 9:11 p.m. and the two enter the apartment together. At around 9:30 p.m., the neighbor, April, walks past Unit 4, Liese's apartment. She heard a muffled yelling, like someone is in pain. The muffled yelling grows louder before there are 5 or 6 thuds. It sounded like someone chopping wood, but the police were not called. Instead, April texts the landlord, Joe, and he says, let's see if it settles down before calling the police. At 10:49 p.m., Heidi texts her daughter, you okay? There was no response. After midnight at 12:30 a.m., a person wearing a Colorado Rocky Mountains sweatshirt is seen leaving the complex. This was Liese's sweatshirt, and it is believed that this is DeAndre leaving the complex. He's wearing different clothes and shoes and carrying a big laundry basket full of clothes and other items. He goes to a large dumpster which is behind a smoke shop in front of Liese's building and throws the basket into the dumpster. He walks back inside the complex but keeps his face hidden behind a yellow cloth so he knows he was being filmed. He leaves the complex around 15 minutes later and gets into Liese's car and drives off. He went to his mother's house where his 2 sisters, his mother, and his grandmother lived and started banging on the door. His other sister said DeAndre was acting incredibly nervous and pacing around the property before coming in to sleep. She saw Liese's black car parked outside the house.
Around 2:30 in the morning that he's like banging on the door and stuff, and he's like pacing and like acting nervous.
Where?
At my house.
This morning?
Yeah, this morning at 2:30.
His grandma stated DeAndre gave her Liese's driver's license, bank card, and some keys he claimed he found on the ground.
Gave me her ID and the debit card.
Okay.
And I said, well, why you got her debit card?
Yeah.
And license, you know. And I said, now she out there driving, and then she thinks she got her license and you got it. Then this morning, he gave me 2 keys.
Okay.
And I said, well, where you get these keys from? And he said he found them on the ground.
The next morning, PJ sees DeAndre cutting off his dreadlocks in the family bathroom. PJ states he was incredibly nervous and DeAndre hadn't cut his hair in over 2 years and was really proud of his dreads. So it was really strange that he was now cutting them off. He then asked his mom for a change of clothes and he then took his other clothes and put them in the trash can outside. Around 12 p.m., he leaves his family's home on foot, leaving Liese's car parked on the street, and it has a handwritten note inside that says, "For sale." It was all just so odd to his family. Inside her own apartment, the place that should have been her shelter, the home for her new baby girl, Liese and her unborn child were murdered. But DeAndre didn't stop there. In an act of pure, calculated brutality, he decapitated her. He then took her head, put it in a laundry basket filled with clothes, left the apartment, and threw it in the dumpster outside, where it would later be found by horrified investigators. However, the next morning, a construction worker also went to that dumpster. He was just throwing out some broken drywall when he discovered a bloody knife. That was the tip of the iceberg of the evidence to be found, and he then called police, and that's when they discovered her head. This level of violence shocked even seasoned law enforcement officers. Police Chief Marcos Polito, in his public statements, did not even hold his words back. He repeatedly referred to DeAndre as a monster. He described the crime as abominable and beyond reprehensible, stating that Liese was savagely killed. Madison County State's Attorney Tom Hain called DeAndre's actions gruesome. The words used by officials were not the typical sterile language of a normal press conference. They were really visceral, human expressions of shock and disgust. I mean, it's just not something they come across every day in their line of work. The act of and the disposal of her head in a dumpster, nonetheless, was more than just a way to kill. It was an act of ultimate dehumanization. It was an attempt to erase her identity, to silence her voice, to desecrate her memory, and to inflict the maximum amount of psychological terror on her family and the community that she lived in, that supported her and would later learn of her fate. It was a final, horrific assertion of power and control over a woman that was trying to escape it. With the sheer savagery of the crime scene, investigators found a detail so heartbreaking it almost feels unreal. The state's attorney, Tom Hain, shared this final, devastating picture from that day. He said, Lisa's last act, her hand was resting on a book about pregnancy. So her last thought was probably about her unborn child. Oh, I legit feel sick. The thought of that alone, what Lisa went through in her final moments, is just, it's really sickening. That single image just lets you know that while she was being attacked by someone who she once loved, while she was dying, her thoughts were likely not on the violence being inflicted on her, but on her baby girl, one that she was so close to holding in her arms. Her last conscious act was of a mother protecting her child, a final gesture of love in the face of absolute hatred. Although DeAndre was in custody, justice for Lisa's family would be long and filled with frustrating delays. So almost immediately, DeAndre's defense team raised questions about his mental fitness to stand trial. This legal maneuver brought the case to a complete stop. In September 2022, following a court-ordered psychological evaluation, a judge officially deemed DeAndre mentally unfit to stand trial. This meant he could not be prosecuted until his mental state improved. He was committed to the care of the Illinois Department of Human Services and sent to a state psychiatric institution for treatment. So that court order noted that there was a substantial probability he could be restored to fitness within a year. So for Lisa's family, it was this agonizing period of just living in limbo, a period where accountability for this crime seemed to be slipping away into the complexities of the legal and the psychiatric systems. So finally, in February 2023, after several months of treatment, the court received a new report from the state's hospital. So based on this new evaluation, the judge determined that DeAndre had regained mental fitness. So he was now competent to understand the charges against him and assist in his own defense. So the case was now back on. However, another legal complication that arose that would impact the potential punishment, I guess, was that prosecutors initially hoped to secure a mandatory sentence of life in prison by charging DeAndre with 2 murders, one for Lisa and one for her unborn baby girl. But during the proceedings, a ruling from the Illinois Supreme Court determined that for the specific legal purpose of triggering this mandatory life sentence, an unborn child could not be counted as a second murder victim. So this didn't mean that killing an unborn child wasn't a crime. It was still charged as intentional homicide, but it removed the second victim for an automatic life sentence. Do you know what I mean? So the state attorney, Tom Hain, he acknowledged that this caused continuous stress and uncertainty for Lisa's family, who are now facing the possibility of a lesser sentence for the man who had taken everything from them. So with the question of his mental fitness settled and a trial date set, DeAndre made this really strategic decision. So in December 2024, he chose to plead guilty for going a trial by jury. He pleaded guilty to 3 of the most serious charges: first-degree murder for killing Lisa, intentional homicide of an unborn baby, and concealment of a homicidal death. So while this plea was an admission of legal guilt, it also served another purpose. It prevented, I guess, a public trial where the full graphic and horrific evidence of his crimes would have been presented for the world to see. It spared him from having to face a jury that would hear Lisa's mother testify about what she found, see the crime scene photos, and listen to the medical examiner detail the brutality of the act. The plea provided legal closure, but it detoured the full public scrutiny that a trial often provides. On January 17th, 2025, DeAndre, now 25 years old, appeared in court for his sentencing. He was sentenced to a total of 60 years in prison. The sentence was structured as 30 years for the murder of Liese to be served consecutively with another 30 years for the intentional homicide of her unborn child. Before the sentence was handed down, the court gave Liese's family the opportunity to face her killer. Heidi stood up in that courtroom and delivered a victim impact statement, giving a voice to their family for the immeasurable pain and loss they suffered. She said, "No sentence or amount of time will bring my daughter or granddaughter back, but this sentence should ensure that he is not able to hurt anyone else." For Heidi and the rest of Liese's family, the guilty conviction finally ended their uncertainty, that period of them just living in limbo. Tom Haynes stood with Heidi outside the courthouse, praising her for her bravery throughout this grueling trial. He expressed his firm belief that the 60-year sentence would, in effect, be a life sentence for DeAndre. He was confident that DeAndre would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars.
That you don't often see the kind of strength that the family of Liese has exhibited in this case. Incredible strength, incredible grace in the courtroom today with her statements to the defendant who lived the life of her daughter and granddaughter, and who over years, as she said, had abused them, and is now going to face decades in prison for the crime of murder for 2 lives, not just one, the mother and the unborn child. And I just want to commend the family. They say that it's very inspirational to see the kind of strength that you've shown, and I'm sure that everyone in the courtroom experienced the same thing.
In the end, Heidi's wish is that her daughter's legacy will not be defined by the monstrous act that ended her life. She wants the world to remember Liese not for the way she died, but for the way she lived, for her kindness, for her love, and for the joy she brought to her family and to her community. She says, "I just wish she would have known how loved she was, that she wouldn't have ever been alone, and that she could have gotten out of this relationship and had a full life." That desire to transform their grief into something positive has become her family's mission. A GoFundMe page organized by Liese's sister Shelby and her fiance Brooke was set up to help with expenses. From the very beginning, the family made a promise that any funds not used for their immediate needs would be donated to 2 causes closest to Liese's heart. So local animal shelters in honor of her lifelong passion, and domestic violence resources in the hope of saving another family from their pain. Heidi has really become a powerful advocate for her daughter. Like we see in so many of these cases, the family just change, and standing before the cameras after the sentencing, she made a direct and desperate plea to anyone who might be in a situation like her daughter. She said, "I plead for anyone in an abusive relationship to seek help making a safe plan to escape. It isn't easy, and it may be one of the hardest things you ever do, but your life is important, and you are worthy and deserve a life free from abuse."
It isn't easy, and it may be one of the hardest things you do, but your life is important, and you are worthy and deserve a life free from abuse.
Maggie Menafee, the executive director of the domestic violence organization called Alive, noted a terrifying increase in not just the frequency, but the severity of domestic violence cases, with her organization receiving hundreds of referrals from police for victims deemed to be at a high risk of being murdered. Statewide, over 41% of women in Illinois have experienced some form of domestic violence in their lifetime. The Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline has seen its contacts more than double since 2019, showing just how many people are desperately seeking help. Liese Dodd's story is a sad reminder that domestic violence is not a private matter. It is a community issue that not only thrives in silence and escalates when warning signs are ignored or even normalized. Liese and her baby Bean deserved a lifetime of happiness. They deserved to celebrate that baby shower. They deserved to come home from the hospital to a nursery with a pink princess crib sheet. Their future was stolen, but their memory can serve as a catalyst for change. It's a call to action to be vigilant, to speak up, and to support those who are trapped in cycles of abuse before it's too late. These types of cases really get to me because, unfortunately, I feel like we can all say that we know someone who's been, in a bad relationship and in a relationship who either was leading down that path of domestic violence or one that was happening behind closed doors or one that was happening out in the open. And I feel like we have to remember that there are ways to get out. there is help out there, and I will leave, links in the description below if anyone needs it. But we have to remember that our lives are important. Our lives are not out here for other people to take, whether it's through murder or just by trapping you. The older I realize, and especially now, how fast time is flying. Like, I remember when I was in my teens thinking, oh my God, time is flying. No, time flies, like, for real. The older you get, when you have kids, when you're in a marriage or relationship, when you have full-time jobs, time flies. And it's not worth it being trapped, being stuck, being abused, and not being happy. It's not worth it. Let me know your thoughts on this case down below, guys. Rest in peace to Liese and her baby Bean. I mean, you guys know how these cases make me feel and how important they are to me. So let me know your thoughts in comments down below. Share this case to help others who feel that there is no way out. There always is. And I look forward to seeing you in next week's video. Besitos, guys. Mwah. Bye.